I work for the LEGO Foundation, and the LEGO Foundation says that there's great power in play, right? So, and we really want to redefine play and reimagine learning. If you think about it, you've seen kids play in all different kinds of contexts in your library, in schools, and everything. We're learning more and more these days that what's actually going on when these children are playing is actually a powerful kind of learning. And it's a kind of learning that's very close to my heart because it's really driven by the interests of the children, right? So when kids are playing, they're creating a game themselves. It's not necessarily someone else's agenda. It's their own agenda. And I think that they are uniquely equipped to be setting the agenda for their own learning. And the way that they do that is by creating playful games, things like that. So our view of the child has a few, I think, powerful words. We really want to see children kind of engaged, empowered, creators, citizens, and because you're all librarians, we want them to return their books on time, of course. That's not in the usual presentation, but I thought just for you guys. So what these words mean, they're sort of big words and everything, but what they really signify, I think, for me, that's the powerful idea here, is that the interest of what is being learned is really coming from the child. And this is a little bit different than what I think is often the way that we think about learning in children, which is kind of like this. So I think in too many schools around the world, especially in the US, what you'll see is this kind of interaction. There's a professor who's kind of going blah, 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 here's a bunch of information. And then there's a student whose role is kind of lean back and try to absorb it. And what this creates is that it's a system where the best students or the most successful students are the ones who really just absorb. They can kind of be passive in a way and then spit back the information in some, when it's required of them. And that's really a different kind of learning, right? Because in some ways it's at odds with the kind of learning that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the kind of learning where the child is actually directing it and they're taking the initiative, right? So it's not just that they're sort of absorbing things, they're actually going out and deciding what it is that they're going to do. And that's very different from what we see in this picture. One of the ways that my boss likes to talk, my old boss likes to talk about this, Mitchell Resnick at MIT Media Lab, is kindergarten. So I work for the lifelong kindergarten group at MIT. And really, the model that we said is a great way of learning is kindergarten, right? So the way kindergarten works, or at least the way it used to work in the States, and it's changing a lot these days, is that there are blocks in one area, and then there are finger paints or crayons in another area, and the child is really free to explore whatever it is that they're interested in, right? Using these kinds of tools. And through the process of interacting with these blocks and these crayons, they're actually learning all sorts of different kinds of ideas that are really, really powerful ideas. And you'll notice that this picture doesn't have a teacher. There is obviously a teacher because, it's not totally chaotic and there's not piles of crayons mixed together. Someone is a steward of the environment. But really, who's directing the play is the kids. So one way we talk about this process is we do this design learning spiral. We call it design-based learning. And the way it happens is that a child, sits down with the blocks. They imagine, I can make kind of a fire station for my toy truck. And then they start to create it. They create this thing. They play with it a little bit. And while they're playing, often they're also engaging and sharing with other kids, right? So other kids are kind of seeing their creation and engaging with it. And then they start to reflect, this one only holds one fire engine, this block fire station. Maybe I need to sort of make an addition, or maybe I need to make it wider, or maybe I can make it any other way. But the way that they are kind of building as they go is that they build, experiment, experience, and then they kind of build again. And so as you can see, it's a spiral that's designed to kind of go on forever, right? You imagine, you create, play, reflect, and then imagine. And really, this is at the core of most design work today. And designers know about this, that you design in a community, and through this kind of iterative process of moving around and kind of growing a design to make it really good and powerful. So I'll talk a little bit about Makerspaces then. So Makerspaces really, often the first thing people think about is like the fancy technology in a Makerspace. But I think that's the wrong way to go about it, because really, the fancy technology, if it comes into a Makerspace, should just be augmenting what's already there. And I know in Denmark that in the schools you guys already have these really fantastic fabrication spaces, right, with woodworking labs and that sort of thing. That's really the core of a Makerspace, I think, is the simple stuff, right? Batteries, wood, Lego, craft materials, that sort of thing. But of course you can add on a few more kind of complicated things that are like drills and digital multimeters if you're going to go electric and that sort of thing too. But it's a space that's designed to contain everything that somebody might need to bring a dream to fruition, whatever it may be. So the more of those tools that they might need that you have close by, then the quicker that they can go, oh, I have an idea, oh, there's the tool I need, and then grab it and then start working on it. Of course, there are also these higher technology things which get a lot of press and attention, right? And a lot of hype. I don't know, does hype translate here in Denmark? Sort of like, oh, 3D printing, but okay, yeah. They are cool. So there are 3D printers over here, that's an example of them, and there's laser cutters over here. Hype just means kind of like over-advertising in a way, I guess. And they are great, and really what they do is that they allow you to change a digital file and instruction set into actual physical matter. So in this case, you have a schematic of what you want to cut out with a laser cutter, and the laser cutter cuts it out exactly. Or if you have a three-dimensional model, you can print it out with a 3D printer. But the really powerful parts of these ideas, really, you can show with a couple of different websites. So this means that if you had like a nice 3D printer kind of set up in your makerspace in the library and people knowing how to use it, then theoretically you could go to this website called Shapeways and you can find all kinds of different kinds of designs of beautiful things that you might want for your home, like this Nest candle holder. And you can download that digital file and essentially say, make this thing here. And the amount of possibilities, it's hard to underestimate what's sort of going to become possible around us in the next 10 or 20 years, because it's so powerful in that changing your relationship to the creation of the artifacts that you use in your life. Because you also, it should be possible to make changes. If you see a design that you think is cool but could use a little bit of work, you can change it, you can tweak it, right? You can make it your own and make it sort of fit in a better way. So, and these are all available on a site called Shapeways. And Shapeways is basically, you know, it's got all these different kinds of sections here. You can find lots and lots of beautiful designs that you can borrow, some of which are open source, some of which are not, you have to pay for it, but all of which I think are really interesting in that you can create. Shapeways will also print them for you if you don't have the right kind of quality of 3D printer. So, there's also something that I want to talk a little bit about, just to kind of, it's called CNC routing. It's the same essential principle as a laser cutter, but it works on larger scale things. So these designs are from a website called opendesk.cc, and they were created by designers in such a way that if you download the file, you have a CNC router, which is essentially like a cutting tool on a robotic arm that can cut any shape that you tell it to. You feed the CNC router that computer file, and you can actually cut out the design for that chair right there. So you can actually, imagine this in your space. One of the ideas that I think is really interesting to think about is maybe we could actually make a makerspace. So you have a CNC router, you involve the community in choosing different designs that are available on the web, and then you also involve them in cutting them out using the CNC router, and then you can actually assemble them and say, well, is this a good chair for our library? Let's try it out. Let's put it in the library for a few weeks and see how it feels. And then, maybe you choose a different design after that. So makerspaces, really, there are a few kind of key ideas there. They have to have an inviting look and feel. They have to be really easy access to tools and materials. And you have to have the examples and the process on display. I've seen some makerspaces which I felt were not inspiring enough because they were just too clean. They looked really like absolutely kind of professional in a way. And I think professionalism, the look of professionalism maybe kind of goes counter to the maker spirit, right? Because making is about just trying it. And even if you don't know that you can do it, just go for it and give it a shot. And if you break, if you make a chair that looks really weird or ugly, I think that's actually a success because you learn something from that process and you can always iterate on it again and again. So not too clean. This is always what I say when people are thinking about makerspaces. But really one of the core ideas is community. So this is a guy who's recently from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I'm going to tell you, don't worry about the technology, forget it, doesn't matter. What matters more is the community that you build around that technology, because that's what determines how it gets used, or if it gets used at all. And if you want it used in a powerful way, you really have to think about that community, and that's what I'm interested in kind of talking to you guys more about too. So now I'll talk a little bit about libraries and making, because it's what you all came here for. So libraries and making are actually kind of a match made in heaven, I think, and a lot of people are sort of seeing that and getting excited about it. So this is just a small shot from Pinterest of all the different kind of library makerspaces that you can find if you Google around online or on Pinterest. There's also in Aarhus, there's this really great Folklab, Aarhus Folklab. I'm probably not pronouncing that properly, but you'll forgive me, I hope. And I really love some of their materials. I'm going to speak with them soon because I think we're really aligned with the way that we think about this. But so I think they're a fantastic resource. They've been doing a lot of interesting maker activities for the last several years, and I think a great source of inspiration. And that's because libraries and making, I think, are really married together well because the libraries already support interest-driven learning, right? So when a patron comes into your library, you don't go up and say, well, here's the book you're going to read, and then after 2 hours, I'm going to quiz you, and I hope you get a good grade. You say, well, what is it that you want to know, right? That's the core idea, or core value of libraries. It's providing people with what it is that they need and whatever it is that they're interested in. And that also really aligns with making, is that you think about what is it that this person wants that we can kind of help them learn, not just with the books as they would in the library, but also help them learn with actual materials and tools and being creative. So let's consider a few things that are possible if we expand the range of tools and expertise that are available to patrons. So we imagine a patron being somebody who uses the library, who is curious about building houses. Well, right now, if they go into a normal library, the librarian helps them find a book about it, right? So that's a great thing to start with. Number two, though, what you could add on to that is you could suggest that they build a playhouse. There's always great kid spaces in the Danish libraries from everyone that I've seen. Why not actually have the patrons being involved in kind of co-creating those spaces using some of the tools in the makerspace? I think that's a great way for them to engage with whatever it is they're interested in, but in a deeper level. So another thing is if a patron wants to come in and wants to learn how to fix her bike, right? The librarian helps them find a book about it. You can do that now, but you could additionally think about showing them the bike fixing tools in the makerspace, right? So maybe it doesn't take that many tools to fix a bike, it's fairly simple. But even better, you can think about introducing them to another patron who has some experience in fixing bikes. And this is where I think DIY is a word that I don't really like that much anymore, even though I do like when people are creating things themselves, because it's do it yourself. And I like do it together, because it's so much more powerful when you are actually in a community of people who are interested in creating and learning to get engaged with a problem. I used to have, of course, a basement workshop, because I just like to tinker. But then the first time I actually went to a makerspace after that, it was really transformative because not only did they have more tools that I didn't maybe have in my basement, they also had people with the expertise that knew how to use them. Right? So if I got stuck on the electronic part, I could say, hey, do you know anybody who knows how to work on this? Oh yeah, that guy over there, he's great at it, ask him about it, and then I would get some help, and it's really, really powerful. So you end up getting this sort of a multiplying effect of what it is that you can create by doing it in community. So to get to a few brass tacks to leave you, to give you guys, so build from existing interests is really key with the makerspace. I can't give you the formula, the true formula of how to make a makerspace because I don't know your kids or your adults. I don't know the patrons that come to your library. You really need to be thinking about what it is that would engage them, right? And that should be like a participatory design team, I think, is a great way to start. So if you have a couple of people in your area who are interested in makerspaces, bring them in and have meetings about it and talk to them and see what would be kind of powerful and interesting. What would they be willing to volunteer to help out with? So if you have somebody who likes bikes in the community, would they be willing to run a workshop and show other people how to fix bikes? That sort of thing is really powerful. And you got to pilot workshops that get to know what works really here in your space. And then iterative development design. Your makerspace, if you build one in 2015, in 2017, it should be somewhat different because your people and their interests are going to change as well. Just like your books change, and you have to be thinking about what's new and powerful.